Howdy, everybody. This is Bill from Cryptid Brothers Investigation of Oklahoma, coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. For Lane, Lance, Dave, and myself, we thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us tonight. I'll be your host, and as our regular listeners know, Lance is usually at the helm hosting our episodes, but because we're receiving an ever-increasing number of people calling us about their cryptid encounters, Lance tag-teamed me to jump into the ring and help host, and I'm very honored and excited to do so. So, Lance, of course, will still host, and it's you, our subscriber, who will win with more mind-blowing episodes coming at you. Also, if you haven't yet, please click the subscribe and like button. Doing so helps us deliver more of the content that you want, that you expect, and helps us grow, so we appreciate you doing that. And our new crypto website, it's coming soon, and we'll let you know when it's up and running, but there's some really cool things you'll want to check out, from t-shirts to eyewitness authenticated dogman and Bigfoot sculptures. Pretty awesome stuff. Today in Tulsa, the weather, it was great. Cool breezes, lows in the 70s. Couldn't ask for more, and I hope wherever you're at, the weather is treating you nice as well. So let's get to tonight's episode. I know that's what you guys are wanting. Antonio, he was extremely gracious to share his shocking encounter. He called us from New Hampshire and recounts a terrifying encounter that happened to him, his brother, and his nephew in Connecticut 8 years ago while on a desolate road. That rainy summer night put him on a path he never thought he'd walk, realizing that the woods he lived near was home to something very imposing, red, and with agility possessed by no man. You'll hear the honesty in his voice and his description of what crossed paths with them that fateful, dark Connecticut night. Just provide any information you'd like and kind of how the day started and what happened.
I'll just tell this. I'm like kind of like a Missouri thing. I'm one of those guys where I'm like a show me, even though I'm from the Northeast.
Absolutely.
Kind of like I just, I don't. But I saw something with my brother and my nephew. And it was one of those things. Here's the thing too, is I'm going to give you a location. And when I give you this location, that's part of it, because people are aware of this, which I was unaware of at the time. I had absolutely no idea. That's what's really weird. And this is what I'm going to tell you.
Sure.
But I don't want it, because just don't want, you know what I mean?
I understand.
If you say it, you may have people running in there. And although it is known. Okay. This was probably around 8 years ago. And I lived in Connecticut. They call it the Mountains. It's part of the Appalachian Mountains.
Okay.
But it's very rural. And then from there, it goes up into like Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Canada. I mean, it can be very, very rural up in these areas. If you wanted to walk in the woods to Canada, you could.
Uh-huh.
So it can be rural, and people don't realize how rural it is. Well, anyway, I lived in this little town up there, and it's the town is called, and it borders another town called, and it gets very, very cold up there, and it's wooded.
Mm-hmm.
But I lived in town, and one night my brother came over with his son, my nephew.
Right.
And I was probably around in my early 40s then. We got bored, and I had a brand new F-150 Ford. And I said, come on, guys. It was kind of rainy and one of those, end of summer when the leaves get real big and heavy and it's kind of damp, but you have that rain and it was just that kind of night.
Right.
So we get in, I had the F-150, we get in there and we drive down to the spot, and I wanted to show them where I had seen a little black bear or two black bears, cubs with the mama. But it was so dark. It was more like cabin fever, let's get out of the house kind of thing.
Right.
So we drove down to this area, and there's this little remote pull-off down there. And they usually stock pheasant in there, and, guys that like to deer hunt, whatever. But anyway, we pulled in this lot, and there was a little creek that runs down there, like a little river that runs through right along the roadside. And when you pull off the main road, you pull down this little road, it twists and turns. The road was probably from the 1600s, who knows. And you pull down, you pull in this little parking lot, and I'm telling them where I was, and I said, we'll come back the next day because you can't really see. Now, mind you, it's one of those nights where you have a lot of shadows. The lights, as you move, the lights, the shadows kind of bounce off each other a little bit,
Right.
Well, here's the weird thing. We start to pull out of this little parking lot. You can only take a right to go back up to the route, or you could take a left and go down the rural route. Well, of course, I'm going back up to the route, to the main route up there, which is Route. And as I start to make the right-hand turn, I see this massive being, like this massive. The only way I can describe it is when your people call in and they talk about the shoulders,
yes,
and the arms on this thing,
right,
and it had but the way it moved, as my lights went, it went with the lights, and it twisted its body like to try to hide behind this tree, like it kind of like did like if you were to like bend your knees and turn your waist, like without moving your legs, like turn and then duck down, like then bend your knees more, like you're ducking. And it did it with the lights, like kind of with me as I went to stay out of sight. But it was so massive that the tree that it went behind, which was a young growth tree, but still, I mean, it was still a pretty good, like you or I could stand behind it and you wouldn't see us.
Right.
This thing twisted its body and went with the light. And I kept driving and I stopped the truck and I said, I just saw something. And my brother goes, and I could tell in his voice, he goes, I did too. My nephew goes, Uncle Dad, he says, I saw something too. I said, okay, what did you see? Now, we're sitting there in the truck's idle, and this is all like going on really fast. And I said, my brother said, I just saw the biggest dieselest thing I've ever seen in my life. He goes, now my brother is about 6'2", 6'4". He's big,
right,
and he's not afraid of nothing, no man,
Mm-hmm.
And he went, I said, let me back up the truck. I got a high-powered light, and I had my .45 tucked between the seat. And my brother said, no. And I said, it wasn't the lights. I saw it. And, we were going back and forth. And it had color to it, too. That was the weirdest thing. And the color was this. I had a pair of shorts on, and my nephew goes, it's the color of your shorts, Uncle. I was trying to, what we just witnessed, we were going, did we, you know what I mean? We're saying, did we actually see what we saw? And it just played such a mind trip on you. And so my nephew said, Uncle, goes, it was the color of your shorts. Now, my shorts were this reddish tan color, like, what, like, oak leaves turn in the fall?
Yes.
Like that.
Right. Oh, wow.
But a little darker.
Okay.
Now, we're sitting there, the truck's idling.
Right.
We're going, blah, 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 like, we're freaking out. Like, we can't believe what we just saw. And everything else, like shadows and all that, were like, that's what was so weird, because the way it moved. So you had this thing. I'm about, let's say I'm 6 feet tall, right?
Right.
If I I would have to reach up my hand about, I would say 7 feet at least to touch the shoulder.
Wow.
That's the shoulder. And the arm, like the bicep was like, there's no bodybuilder, there's nobody that looks like that. And here's the thing, too. The way it moved and twisted, the agility of it, as we went by and the lights bounced, that it would be like a guy that was that muscular. And that, I mean, the thing would have to be, if its shoulder is like 7 feet, 7.5 feet, what would the head be, 10 feet? I don't know, 9, 10 feet?
Yeah, that's a good
estimate.
estimate.
The way it just kind of, I even started thinking, I'm like, was it the rear end of a moose? But a moose's hind end is only about 5 feet, if that, 6 feet. No, I don't even think.
Sure.
That's a bull moose, the hind end, I'm saying, But it wasn't even the right color or anything. It was it was a being. It was that we saw. But we were just going, whoa, what? It was like freaking us out. And the way it twisted, that was the other thing. It wasn't like it took a step. It twisted and dropped with the light. Because It saw the light coming in. It was like, ooh, caught, and it just went with it like, you don't see me. I'm moving with the I'm moving with your light to hide and twist and try to hide behind the tree. This was probably about 10 o'clock at night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, here's the thing.
Uh-huh.
I told you I had a 45.
Right.
I had a high-powered spotlight, and I said, let me back the truck up. And that's the one regret I have. But my brother, to this day, he says, I didn't want to see it. I'm glad we didn't. And I think if you shine the light on this thing, it would have ripped us apart. And I don't care that you had that 45. And he's not afraid of anything. I've seen him walk up to dudes you just wouldn't, you know what I mean? Especially when he was younger, you know, and he just had that, and he just was like, I've never seen anything like that.
That's amazing.
And my nephew saw it. Now, here's the weird, it doesn't stop there, and I don't know if you care to hear this part, but
yeah, absolutely.
What happened was I had a friend of mine,
right,
at that time was about 72 years old, grew up there his whole life. He used to let me hunt his property, and I was kind of new to that town. I grew up in Connecticut, but not in that area. We had moved up there when I got married, and because I liked it, because I like to hunt and fish and all that. So I saw him. He had a little place that he owned, and I walked in there, and I don't want to use his name because you know he's gone now, but you know, so I walked in there, and I said to him, I said I got to ask you a question. And he said, what's that, you know? He was kind of like a John Wayne guy, tough guy, you know what I mean? You could tell back in the day, was in the Army, you know what I mean? Just one of these guys.
Sure.
So I said, another one, you know, just a rugged guy, you know, you wouldn't. And even at 72, you looked at him and, you know, you just are like, this guy, you know, could handle himself. And I told him the story. No, at first I said, has there ever been anything of Bigfoot? Or I go, don't think I'm crazy. He's smoking a cigarette. He puts his hand down. He looks me right in the eye, and he goes, ha! I can see the smoke come out of his mouth. He goes, you too, huh?
Oh,
I go, what? Tell me. So he says, no, I had an encounter too. And he told me that years earlier, like 20 years prior or 30 years, he'd been hunting in that same spot. He never got a glimpse of it, but something stalked him so bad and scared him so bad that he ended about 1.5 miles over the mountain. He rolled down through the snow out onto the road and walked the road back. So he wasn't walking, as a crow flies, it was 1.5 miles, but to walk it back was probably like 5 miles. But he didn't care. He said, I just wanted to get out of the woods. A buddy of his, same thing happened to him. So now I'm going, this is crazy. So I go home. This is all in the same week. I'm like, I just had this spiritual thing about it. I Google it. Bang, comes up. Wildman of Winstead since the 1800s. And that there was a man. Look it up. Google it yourself. This, I went on the website. Supposedly, they had like a first selectman mayor back in like 1880s. And he had this bulldog, which they said in the article was known for its pluck, meaning it had a tenacious, it could be very, very courageous. He was picking wild, and they grow up there, a lot of wild blueberries and wild raspberries, and they still do to this day. He was walking along picking these things, and this big, hairy ape man jumped out in front of him and started to scream at him. The dog got so upset it ran between his legs, cowering, and he just froze, and then the thing ran off. And according to the articles I read, and now you have to Google this yourself, and you will see it.
Absolutely.
It's a real account. It really happened. It made the papers and everything back then. I think a New York paper got a hold of it. They supposedly formed a posses, and they went through the hills. And back then, you know, the land was more cleared. You had mostly woods on the hilltops, a lot of agriculture, you know, with the cattle and sheep and stuff.
Right.
So they kind of went through this, and they actually chased out some feral pigs and some other things, but they never caught it. But they said because this man he was the first selectman and had such a reputation for being honest, they took him seriously. And from then on, and then I even saw stuff in the 70s. In the 70s, there was a lot. Now, you had that film that came out, of course, about Bigfoot in the 70s, and who knows. But this has been going on. And when you take into the account, my friend, these are men that, these aren't guys that cower easily, especially to other men or things.
Absolutely.
These are the kind of guys that'll shine a flashlight and go, what the heck's going on? You know what I mean?
Right.
My buddy up there who passed away, God rest his soul, these are men. Same with my brother. And here's me. I was really ready to back up and shine the light. I don't know. I just have this, maybe because I'm in the woods a lot, and I just could not believe what I was seeing. But I have to say this. That guy you had on there from the lake, and some of the people, when they say, and he said something, this is what grabbed me. He said, I had a .357 Magnum on me, and I felt it wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it didn't even dawn on his mind, you know? Now, I had that 45, and I thought, I'm protected here, if worst comes to worst. What did I just see now? And I had no understanding, no inkling that there had ever even been anything like that. It was more of like, what the heck did we just see? It was that unbelievable. That's the story.
That's amazing.
You're listening to a guy here. I just don't. I don't believe in that stuff, and yet I saw it, and I can't explain it. I wish that I had backed up the truck, but there were 3 witnesses: my nephew, my brother, and you can ask them if you ever wanted to. I'm sure they would probably give their. And the story's not going to vary. There was something that was enormous size, and it moved like a cat.
A large percentage of folks, when they see a Bigfoot, they describe it as so fluid-like that it's almost like floating. And that sounds like kind of what you're describing.
That's a good word, fluid. It like just moved with the lights, like a young athlete could do, like ready. Like
Right.
If you were ready. And this thing went from a standing position to like with it. But it wasn't quick enough. We caught it.
So it was standing. Did you see 2 arms, 2 legs, and a torso?
Yes.
And a head?
Yeah, we saw the most thing. This is the thing with us. Because it was like standing sideways, it was more of a silhouette. It was kind of like that. So it was more of a silhouette. And you got to remember I told you it was dark,
Right,
rainy, that kind of thing. The most thing that my brother and I really say, the color and the shoulder on that thing. You could see the legs. I could see the twist, like the thigh, kind of, and the twist. You knew it's like a human figure. You know what I mean? Like a
sure,
ape or human or whatever, figure. And I want to say too, there was nothing lumbering about it. This thing was like muscular and moved like a cat and big.
You're saying that it was roughly in the 10-foot range? Is that what you said?
I would say 9 to 10 feet tall. If you were to put the head on it, yeah. Because we saw it like the silhouette, but what popped out the most was that when it turned, it's like all of our eyes went to its shoulder. It was just so like almost unproportionate. Not unproportionate, but just like if you took like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime, and when he was completely muscle bound out, like in his full prime, blown out, and then made him 9 feet tall or whatever,
Right.
but yet longer arms, much and more like and completely fluid.
And did it turn away from you when it crouched, or did it turn toward you?
It turned away to get behind the tree.
I see.
Like, I'm not here. And we're like, we see you,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't like making any kind of, it was trying to because remember, I was sitting there parked. And then when I pulled out, I turned the truck and we pulled right up. So the light, wherever it was there, and then as, it was almost like, if it was a human or whatever it was, let's just say it was a being of cognizance that didn't want to be seen. It was like kind of like, oh no, I'm going to be seen. I'm not really in the spot I should be.
Right.
That's the feeling I got. Like the thing was thinking, I'm not really where I should be, and I'm gonna be spotted. So I'm just gonna move along with the light and just kind of twist and turn and try to hide behind this tree. But it didn't work out. if you didn't have a keen eye,
Right.
you might not have caught it.
And you saw it just outside of the head beam lights, is that right?
In the head beam light, I could see color.
I see.
No, it was in the head beam, but you got to remember, it was in the turn. So when I pulled out of the lot, even though the lights were shining across, I made that right. I made the decision to go right. Maybe it was thinking I was going to go left. I didn't have a blinker on. There's nobody there.
Did you go out the same way?
Exactly. Right. I backtracked.
Okay.
It knew that we were parked there, and we were sitting there. I was telling them about the bears, and I was telling them how I hunt in there, and we got to see it, but it's a bad. I said it's a crappy night. It's raining, but I said we'll come back the next day. This is how convinced we were. I went down there to look for tracks, but it rained so hard that night, and anything that was there along the riverbank was washed away. And it was as smooth as silk, looking for tracks.
How long were you guys parked at that location before you left?
Not long. Let's say 10, 15 minutes at the most.
I'm sure it saw you come in and watched you. Like you said, I think that was the case where it thought you were going to turn one way and you didn't, and it actually was surprised.
You want to hear something else creepy about that spot, too?
Go ahead.
The year before, I was hiking up in the mountain. It's right across, right where that lot is. If you walk in about 200 yards and you go up this mountain, there's a trail up there. And I've walked it. I've hunted with my dog up there, everything for birds. And the first year I went up there, I found a tent up there. It was like one of those dome tents, like the ones that guys go hiking with.
Yes.
And there was camping equipment, everything, like flattened out and strewn everywhere. And I'm like, who would leave this here? It's a nice tent. And it was a nice, I thought maybe somebody was partying up there and they just maybe left and just never went back for it. But I'm like, who would leave all this nice stuff strewn around?
That is creepy.
Just made me wonder. That was and I never really, it's just playing it back in my mind. I always had and I still went in there. And I don't know why, but I just personally, because I'm a person of faith, and I feel protected in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And,
we absolutely are as
grace,
well.
But
yes.
So no matter what it is, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We saw something. And that color was, the only way I can describe it was like, I wish I still kept those short. Like I said, like an autumn leaf, reddish brown.
So at this time of the season, you said it was late summer, so obviously nothing's turning as far as the leaves, right?
They're green, they're waxy, they're big. You know how it gets like that? Yes. And then when it rains, they get that real, flaxy look to them,
Right.
And they're waxy looking, and it's all dewy and raining. But it's kind of chilly because you're up in the hills up there. So it might have been 60 degrees, but it's summer still, but it gets cool up there. So even in the late summer, it can get cold up there. I mean, I've actually been up there in the summertime at that buddy of mine's house where he was.
Right.
He's right up in, that's the ice box. He lived up there, and I've been up there in July, and he had the fire going because it gets chilly at night.
Sure. Have you spoken about this encounter with your brother and your nephew?
I have. It's all the same thing, exactly what I'm telling you. To this day, my brother, and I told him I was going to call you guys, and he's like, oh, man, he laughed, He's like, you gonna? And I said, yeah. He doesn't really know, but I said, these guys, I feel comfortable because I listened to you guys in the way you were treating people. You were treating them with a lot of respect, anonymity, because I would never do it.
That's our main goal with folks. We don't judge folks. We don't need to know any specific
No, I saw that.
Names
it was nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Respectful.
We're respectful. That's very important to us.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I can't prove it, but I'm telling you.
I absolutely believe you.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Creep me out, man.
It's wild. I mean, that's a wild story, I got to tell you.
People say, you ever see Bigfoot? Yeah, I saw something, which I never meant to. I don't think a person could, if it exists, there's no way you could just say, well, I'm going to go find one. Not going to happen.
Right. There's certain circumstances you have to be in to either know what you're doing ahead of time or just by happenstance. But there's a correlation with early morning sightings and bad weather, rain. We interviewed a gentleman.
Really?
Yeah, and I can't remember the episode. This was southeast Oklahoma. He was tending to some deer feeders, and this was probably about 5 a.m., and it was dark. He was by himself. This was extremely rural, forested area, and he came across an intersection, and this massive Bigfoot walked out in front of him. He said that this thing was so large that he had a sense of how tall it was because it passed right in front of a county sign. We went and investigated this area. The county sign, I stood right by it. It's 10 feet high, the county sign. He said the shoulders came to the level of the sign and then its head was above that. So we estimated this about 12 feet tall, this Bigfoot.
Wow. It was hard for me because I was looking at the tree, and the next day we went down there, I told you, to look for tracks, and I walked up to the tree we thought it was and about where it was. That's why I'm saying I put my hand up. I would have to say the shoulder would have to be, I don't know, I'm trying to think about how high that would be, maybe like at least 7 feet at the shoulder.
That's gigantic.
Yeah. Now put a neck and a head on that thing, and proportionate size with the way it moved. It just was not any kind of, it would be an athlete that big, you know, it would be something that would be so very formidable. And that's why my brother was like, no way, that thing would rip. When he said it too, and I was telling him, like I said, I was going to call you guys, and he's like, I'm like, don't you wish we kind of went back? And he's like, no, that thing would have tore us out of there.
Yeah, I mean, he knew real quick, this is not something we want to deal with, which I respect that totally. There's the inquisitive side, certainly, but then there's the realism, like, okay, well, it'd be nice to see, but we don't want to deal.
Yeah, that's how he was. I call him Dr. Feelgood, because I'm like, yeah, you're the one. He would be the one like, oh, no, let's check it out. And I'd be like, no, leave that.
You guys flipped roles.
No, check it out. He was the opposite, because he's the younger brother, and I'm the one that's usually like, no, and he was like, get the hell out of here, so I don't even want to deal with this thing. That's how he was. To this day, he has no regrets. Freaks me out a little bit.
Would you say that you now believe in Bigfoot, or are you still kind of questioning what you saw?
I know we saw something.
Right.
Okay? I'm describing to you exactly what I saw, what the situation was. So I'm very torn. I don't like the fact if there is something like that creeping around. It makes me uneasy because you're talking about something we don't know about, and can it potentially take some hunter and just tear them apart, or, you know what I mean, or some camper, or what are these things? What could something like this could be potentially dangerous? It's creepy. And so to me, it kind of stirs that within me, but at the same time, I'm absolutely telling you 100% what I saw, what I can recall, and what we saw that night.
Sure.
Could there be reasons? Could somebody say, hey, was it a, you know, just freaked you out maybe the night, big guy in a suit out there? I don't know what anybody would be out there for, right?
Sure.
You know, you could come up with reasons. And that's why I say, until one is shot, until I see the hair, until somebody says, man, I got one here, or we've got one of these things, I can't say I believe in it yet. But we saw something. Now, if I had backed that truck up and the thing, you know, I saw it again or did something, yeah, then I'd be forced to. That's why, in a way, I have a regret. Because in a way, I wanted to know more than my brother. He just went, which is really strange. I can't even convey that to you enough. He is the one that's everything's the good idea. Oh, yeah, let's check this thing out, you know.
Right.
To this day, he's like, nope, I want to see it. Don't want anyone to know about that thing.
I know that torn feeling. My brother and I, Lane, we had an encounter at our home when on a summer night, this was like early 1980s, we were boys. We actually went to bed, and we had really thin curtains at that time. And we were just talking. We were facing the same way. He had his twin bed on the north side of the house and mine just next to his. So we're sitting there talking, and we see three silhouettes. And I remember it to this day. It just burned in my brain. But they were hair covered. They were side profiles in single file, walking right by our house. It was a moonlit night, so we saw the silhouettes extremely well. And I remember the typical cone-shaped head, no neck, and it was almost like they were like a father, a mother, and a child. Nothing banged on the house or anything. We thought it was my brother Lance and my other brother bothering us. But I got up because they were walking along the house, like I said, and I went to the north side, the window that was facing the north side, and I remember standing there, and I couldn't bring myself to pull that curtain and peek. I was so scared, but I was that torn feeling. So I know what you mean by that. To like, do we go back or do we not? What is your nephew? What does he think about all this?
He's just is like, whoa, but he doesn't really, like, none of them dwell on it, him nor my brother, nor do I.
Sure.
But we don't forget the memory. It's kind of like, okay, something was there that night we couldn't explain. Now, I want to tell you this, too. Okay. Remember I told you I saw the color? You just brought something to mind.
Sure.
If you were to say, did you see the hair, because of the night and because of the it was rainy and, real crappy, and shadows were bouncing all over the place. Your lights were reflecting off the things. But what made us know that this is what, like, embedded it in us is we all saw the color. I know me and did, for sure. And I think my brother did too. I don't know how it registered in his brain that way. But I know because he said, your pants, your shorts. And I'm like, oh, that's it. Because I looked at my shorts before he said it. But I can't say hair. Do you understand what I'm trying to say to you? It was
understand.
Like because of the night. But everything else is like, because you see trees and they're like, what color there? This was that color. This color stood out from everything else in the sense that we knew, we saw this thing twist and duck. We saw the arm, the size, and the color of it. It was no mistaking that it was something.
You never saw a face. It turned, like you said, away from you.
No, because when it turned away, and it got like its head behind the tree. Brother remembers more of the shoulder. I remember the shoulder, but I also remember part of the leg, like I saw its butt, like, as it turned,
Yes.
And it definitely didn't have like, well, here you go. It wouldn't have been enclosed because it had color, the same uniform color, and then you could see the muscle, you know what I mean? The definition, like that, the
Sure.
shoulder and the size of this. And it wasn't, but yeah, it would have been massive. I mean, I don't even know what I would estimate a weight on that thing, but it would be a formidable. There's no basketball. I've seen some of the biggest giant guys. There's nothing that big. Nothing like that I've ever seen. No way.
That's
and what
amazing.
would somebody like that be doing out there in the middle of the hills,
That's right. You mentioned you were a hunter. Now, does that kind of make you think differently when you do hunt? Do you still hunt? And do you hunt in this area?
I don't hunt in that area because I'm in New Hampshire now.
I see.
Here's the weird thing, man. This is what bothers me. I started watching the YouTube thing, and they're like, some of these guys are off the hook, and they're like with the trees down. But I'm seeing that now. A lot of it's natural, but I actually found an area like a blind that a hunter used. Maybe I've been here 5 years ago, and I would say that blind was about 5 years old, so maybe 10 years ago, abandoned, never used it again. But it was made out of string and sticks and everything. But
Sure.
then in the woods, we found one that you couldn't sit. You could lay in it, underneath it. It's all got logs piled up on both sides. It probably had something on it. But I'm thinking, why would a hunter make a blind underneath this? And my wife even said, wow, how did that tree get wedged, this massive tree wedged between two trees? And then, and I've been seeing this thing, and I'm like, I don't even want to think this because it freaks me out. I walk in there in the morning, and I used to hunt up there, and you're out before light, going through lousy conditions, rain, whatever. And I don't want to think that there's something out there looking at me like that. That's, 20 times my speed and strength. That's what freaks me out about it. But we need to know about them. We need to know about what they are. Some people think they're Nephilim. You know that. You've heard that too.
Right.
Yeah. And we seem to be getting more and more and more of these sightings.
It's amazing how many calls we get from across the nation. Lane, our brother, I don't know if you listened to it. He is our first episode. He had an encounter in western Oklahoma, and he describes the fluid nature of what he saw. And it really is interesting how many folks tell us about how it moved with such ease. We interviewed a gentleman that just outside of Tulsa saw one at about 2 in the morning, and he was with some friends. He made a turn, and this thing walked out in front of him and looked at him and just kept walking. He tried to follow it with his lights, and it somehow disappeared in this field, whether it quickly ran across the field or it crouched down. But there's a theme with this, with how these things move with such ease and stealth,
This
that
thing
it's
knew
really
how
amazing.
to move with the light. It
Yeah.
knew, like, it was used to it. Like, if you had a flashlight, it would, like, you ever, okay, think about, like, you're playing with your friends as a kid and you got flashlights out in the yard. And
Yes.
somebody goes and you anticipate that light kind of with it and they don't see you.
Sure.
You duck, as it's coming around, you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's how this was. That one with those guys, that's what caught my attention with you, those two guys on the lake. That was pretty incredible. He mentioned that, too, of its speed and the thing of where he said that the gun part, like, this isn't enough.
Are you talking about the episode, the Ohio Bigfoot attack?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's an amazing encounter for sure.
And I heard him, and I heard a couple other people say the fluidity thing. It can, like, to me, it's just for its size on how agilely it can move and twist or whatever it wants to do. And you said your brother, was it, or this guy?
Well,
your brother said he had that same
Lane.
feeling about it.
Well, Lane, when he first saw this, he was in a vehicle. They were parked. They were catfishing and had the river behind them, but then they had somewhat of a field in front of them, and he saw something moving. He didn't quite know what it was. This was probably about 150, 200 yards out, and he said that this thing moved with such stealth and like it was floating. And then he kept his eye on it, and then it went into the wood line. And then he heard branches cracking and breaking, like it didn't care to be heard. And it actually was flanking them. And it came up behind them alongside the river. And this was dark about this time, and it stepped out. And Lane had a gun and said, basically, who are you? I've got a gun. I'll shoot if you don't identify yourself. And this thing did not say a word. And it stood there kind of swaying back and forth. Lane said that this was kind of a grayish Bigfoot. And
it was like grayish color?
Yeah, it was grayish color. And it didn't say a word. It was just swaying there. And he couldn't quite make out the face at that time. And his friend freaked out and started the truck. And when he put the brake lights on, he saw it really well and said that this thing started after his buddy just floored it. Tires were spinning and the back end of the truck was kind of jumping to gain traction, and this thing actually started chasing him. And it kind of swatted its hand out toward the back of the truck, which it never touched. But his buddy just was going like 60 plus 70 miles an hour down a dirt road like fishtailing, and Lane said, stop, slow down, you're gonna roll us. And his buddy finally calmed down. And anyway, Lane wanted to go back and like, we gotta see what this thing is, kind of like what you were talking about. And his buddy's like, no way, we are not going back. That really does go back to when you're out in the woods, it's extremely important to protect yourself and have a gun when you go out and be familiar with it. But in addition to that, to be with at least someone else, not by yourself.
I have to say, and I want to emphasize this too, when we pulled out, this all happened when we took that right and we saw it. It was almost like this would be the time lapse. It would be like, we see it, we turn, I stopped the truck. I must have rolled 15 feet, stopped, but I'm facing in the direction I'm supposed to be going. I made the turn full, complete. And I went, oh man, I just saw something. This is coming back to me now too, especially. And my brother goes, oh, me too. Like that with his voice, like, oh man, me too, you know? And like, that's when my nephew goes, me too, Uncle Dad, I saw something. And I'm like, what did you see? And I was talking like that. He goes, I just saw the biggest, you know, and like what I told you earlier. And that's when I said, let me back up. So, but then I keep thinking, if we had backed up, he may have been gone too.
That's
That's
true.
time in between. You know what I'm saying? It might have been gone. Because I got the feeling it was you know what's creepy? Is that we were sitting there for 10, 15 minutes. That thing was there. Was it coming to see us? Or was it waiting for us to leave? Was it curious?
I think it was trying to
but
get
then-
out of the area if it was trying to get out of your lights.
Like, I think it knew it had been seen.
Did you have your windows down at the time? Did you hear any steps or branches crack or break or any footfalls?
No, but I think I dropped the window and I was going to back up and I had the light. And I said to my brother, I think I said I got my 45, and he was like, I don't care, get the hell out of here.
Right.
And it's like, what, you know, if it was like the biggest football player, martial art guy that ever existed, he would have been like, yeah, shine the light on the guy. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? But he was like, get the hell out of here. That's not that's not something to be toyed with.
We can see something, not necessarily know what it is exactly, but know enough to say it's not something we want to mess with.
Exactly. And I had that feeling too, but the curiosity of like, no, we got to see this thing, because for me, it's like, I want to know. And until one is shot or this or that, I'm not buying it. Even though I saw something, and that is absolutely, you can take that to the bank.
Oh, I absolutely believe you.
You know what I mean? To me, it's like, I don't like the thought of it. It makes me wonder what's going on.
Sure.
It's the unknown, and I don't like it. I like to know. Look, I love going in the woods, and I love the critters out there, and there's the unknown. I like that. You know,
Sure.
it's part of being in the wild.
Exploration.
But at the same time, animals are animals. This thing wouldn't be like, you know what I mean? If these things do exist, you're not talking about a bear or a wolf or even a creature we never saw, but is an animal. This thing is like, it moves with the light, knows to avoid man. It can reason. That's a scary thought.
That's why they're able to avoid detection and survive. They're built to live in the wood. They have to be to catch their prey. They have to be to catch a deer, a wild hog, and
Right.
to avoid man. So these are characteristics that make sense when you think about it.
It does. I mean, I said that when I saw that Bigfoot thing as a kid back in the 70s. We had like these philosophical conversations about it then, and I remember saying at that time, I thought, hey, there might be one of these, because everything, you're a kid and it's all the big wild, wilderness, out west somewhere or whatever. And I did rationalize. I said, well, if this thing has an intelligence, maybe not quite like ours, but still, or like ours, or just a really high intelligence, it's adapted to live in the woods. It would be like, think of you with the power of a grizzly bear, the speed of a wolf, the hearing of a deer, and the eyes of a hawk. You could stay away from, and you could just live in the woods eating bark, berries, and deer or whatever.
That's right.
You could avoid people.
That's right. You adapt.
Easily.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not like a deer walking like, as smart as a white-tailed buck is, he still has a vulnerability. These things are like, and they can hear like a deer, so they're like, no, I'm out of here.
Well, they're definitely on the top of the food chain in the forest. That's no doubt.
They exist, though. They fear us. They already fear us. There's no doubt about it. Something must have happened. Some precedent was set, in a sense, where they're afraid to come out of the woods and say, hey, man, I'm here.
Right.
They avoid.
They're smart enough to understand that part, because I think they do know what guns are, and they do know that they could die at the hands of a gun easily, quickly.
Yes.
That's a good point. That you're right. There was some precedent set at some point for them to understand enough that those things, humans, especially humans with guns, can kill us. It does make sense.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder if there is such a thing that exists. I even think with the Native Americans that man has a tendency, he's not going to go out one or two. He's going to get 100 and go and get you with spears and bows. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If he feels threatened. So I'm saying that this thing would have had to know that man equals danger. Even though they could rip us in half, they're going to get 100 of us. And now we're looking for you.
Right. That decision they've made in their mind that man could kill us actually has allowed them to survive. Lance always says that structure dictates function. You've got a massive being, very stealthy. They're the top of the food chain, at least in the forest. They can easily get the food they need, and they can avoid man. This allows them to live in a forest not bothered, essentially.
And take extreme weather.
That's right.
People who know me know I don't lie, too. And so I've even told, I told my mom not long ago, because I was thinking of calling you guys.
Sure.
The good thing about my incident is I had 2 witnesses.
That's right.
Which is really good.
Lane, Dave, Lance, myself, we all talk about this. Like I said, we get a lot of people calling us. It's one of those situations when you hear someone telling their story. You can tell when people are feeding you something, right? For the most part. I really feel like...
Pretty much.
Now,
unless they're like a pathological liar or something.
That's right. Certainly. You've got you've got those folks out there. But for the most part, when someone's telling you something, you can pretty quickly pick up on if it's true or not. And I can tell that you saw something, and I appreciate you calling us and sharing this story. We're just honored that folks like yourself trust us to air these stories. It helps a lot of folks that may be on the fence. There's a lot of folks that have an encounter. It really affects them in ways that are actually negative, and some that it doesn't. But there's folks really struggling with what they saw. It affects sometimes their job, their relationships, because it's such... Wow. It can, because especially if they had a very terrifying encounter. They were by themselves, they had a terrifying encounter, and they feel like they just can't go to anybody and say, guess what I experienced? It's really tough. So they fight this inside, and it's hard for them to reach out anywhere. They're afraid of ridicule, and it's understandable. So that's the reasoning why we do what we do, to help folks say, you know what, the Cryptid Brothers, they are non-judgmental. They will listen to me. They will provide confidentiality, and let's call these guys. I picked that up
when I listened to you guys. I could tell right away. You guys are very respectful. Mom and Dad have brought you up right, and you guys have a definite respect, and I saw that with your listeners.
Yeah, I definitely would like to keep in contact with you.
Look up Wildman of Connecticut. Please Google that. There's been different things written since I read it originally.
Yeah, and I definitely am going to check that out. I just want to thank you for calling us and trusting us. Your story is amazing. Again, thank you so much for sharing that.
I like the way you handle people, all people that call, and you just handle people with a lot of respect, and it really says something about you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. We all do. And thank you so much. And
all right,
take care. Thanks for calling in. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.